Good morning. I'm Nektaria Karakatsani from the Ministry of Energy and Environment, and I will be moderating this exciting session on the EU Green Deal and the Fit for 55 package. Four distinguished speakers are going to share with us today their crucial and valuable insights on aspects of the green transition. I'm particularly honored to have here with us the Spanish ambassador to the Hellenic Republic, so señor embajador, bienvenido, Mr. Enrique Viguera, and the other speakers will be connected digitally as our discussion evolves. As a brief overview, I would like to mention that Europe is definitely a front runner when it comes to climate policies and climate ambition. And the same holds for Greece. We are really decarbonizing our energy mix at a faster rate than any other European country. Overall, the Green Deal is a massive transformation of our entire economy. It consists of almost 100 legislative proposals, and up to now, 28 of them have been submitted and 15 have been fully adopted. The new package was actually launched and presented in July. It introduces more than 1,000 targets and quantitative indicators that need to be monitored. What is actually the objective? The objective is to reach net zero emissions by 2050. And in order to achieve this, new sectors are needed now to accelerate their transformation. The package places a lot of emphasis on heating, transportation, and industry. It unravels huge investment opportunities. More than 500 billion euros investments need to be materialized across Europe on a yearly basis from now on. What is also crucial in terms of green financing is that the European Commission over the next years is going to issue more than 150 billion euros, raising money for renewable and energy efficiency projects, among many others. In parallel, a social fund is being established based on more than 70 billion euros in order to mitigate the effects of this transition to vulnerable consumers, but it will only be activated from 2025. Currently, the dominant issue is the escalation of energy prices. Actually, prices have reached levels which are difficult to justify based on economic terms. Beyond demand and supply fundamentals, beyond subtle geopolitics, there are also allegations about potential manipulative strategies by financial speculators. So governments have responded. The Greek government reacted promptly, introducing specific measures to shield the consumers from these escalating effects. And the same applies to the Spanish government. Minister Skrekas actually submitted an EU-wide proposal in order to avert such incidences under extraordinary circumstances at a more permanent basis. And over the next weeks, we expect the European Commission to issue a toolbox guidelines on the type of measures that countries can apply in order to protect their consumers within the framework of the European law. So there is a lot of discussion again about the cost of this transition, how we can address it, and how we can manage it in the most cost-efficient manner. So far, the questions and the answers were actually focused on PPAs, synergies across commodities, across sectors, across several countries, new business models that need to be defined, the significant role of energy communities, as well as regulatory incentives in order to boost efficiency and innovation. Now more questions arise in the following directions. Do the European markets have the right instruments? Do we need additional mechanisms to correct the situation? Because what we observe now is quite distorting. The market signals actually encourage switching from gas to coal, whereas we were expecting to do exactly the opposite. What is the speed of innovation? Is it happening at the required rate? How is risk going to be managed as we look for scalability at technologies which are not mature yet? And can we have crystal clear solutions when it comes to the role of gas in the green taxonomy? We are going to certainly have 2 years of tough negotiations ahead of us, and it all needs to converge by the end of 2023 over the Spanish presidency of the European Union. It is indicative that the European climate law in July was actually voted positively by 63% of the parliament. And this means that there are a lot of heterogeneous views across Europe, and we certainly need to work hard in order to gain again consensus and trust in the markets. So after these introductory remarks, it is my great pleasure to welcome again His Excellency, the Ambassador of Spain, and Mr. Viguera, the floor is yours for your keynote speech. Thank you very much.
Do I have the presentation here?
Yes, it will be uploaded by the organizers.
Yeah. So thank you very much, Nektaria, for this presentation. I think in your presentation, you sum up all the challenges that the European Union and all member states have in front of us for the next few years. In my presentation, I will try a bit to develop some of the elements of your presentation, but trying to focus on what's going on right now, particularly in Europe, vis-a-vis the increasing gas prices and the increasing electricity prices. What has been the reaction of some member countries? What should be the reaction of the European Union? And what are the challenges for the foreseeable future? Of course, this is not the position of Spain as such. This is my personal contribution for this panel of energy experts, because I was partly in my career doing energy issues. Of course, my statement do not necessarily reflect the official position of Spain. I don't know how to change it. Where? That one? Doesn't. Yeah. Well, basically, summing up, we all know what the Green Deal is about. It's the European response for the climate change and environmental degradation of the world. And our intention is to have a first climate neutral continent in 2050. For this, there will be a lot of money needed, and roughly a third of the Next Generation EU Recovery Plan will be dedicated to that aim. Besides, of course, an important part of the financial perspectives of the European budget and finance of the European Union. The Fit for 55 package is a new set of proposals by the European Commission to try to update, mostly update EU legislation to make sure that by 2030, the greenhouse gas emission will be reduced by at least 55% in 2030 compared to 1990 levels. The Commission presented the package on July 14th, and it's already been discussed at the European Parliament level and will be discussed by the Council. There are many pieces of legislation being discussed. some of them of incredible, difficult, technically, questions. Some of them are extremely important, so it will take a lot of time to revise, to discuss. Probably by 2024, 25, new targets will be established, taking into consideration the different positions of member states, and also a model in order to secure the implementation by different member states of this new legislation that is going to be approved in the next few years. The most important of this legislation will be the revision of the EU emission trading system, the revision of the effort sharing regulations, the revision of the Renewable Energy Directive, the recast of the Energy Efficiency Directive, the Energy Tax Directive revision, and the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism. There will be others, also very important, and of course, the Social Climate Fund will be of a paramount relevance as well. But now we have a major problem. And even before we start discussing the new legislation in order to secure our ambitious targets by 2030, we are facing with an unexpected situation with a big increases in the price of gas. Due to different factors, international factors, such as the demand of China, which is also moving away from carbon, and entering into a new phase of renewables. Also, European factors, such as also the increase in Europe due to house heating or air conditioning this summer, remote working, COVID conditions, industrial output after COVID, increased coal and oil prices. There have been also some important supply problems, output interruptions by Norway, by Russia. There even have been allegations about market manipulation by Gazprom, who have been studied by the Commission right now, etc., etc. Insufficient storage. The new gas structure in Europe, by which contracts are independent on more and more independent of oil prices. So this has increased substantially also the price of gas. And although scenarios may substantially vary from country to country, electricity prices are present hiking all around Europe. In some countries, although gas is not so determined, in some countries like Spain or Italy, this has had a direct effect on the hikes of the price of electricity. The Commission has also admitted that 20% of the increased electricity prices is due also to the higher cost of carbon through the European trading system. In Spain, wholesale electricity prices have more than tripled since December 2020, sparking an irrational political blame game. Today, the price of electricity in Spain is 190 euros megawatt hour. It's a record. And I was saying gas in itself is not so important in the Spanish energy mix. Also is not so important as electrical generation. It's roughly 26%. But as I was explaining to some colleagues before, it is very, very important as a sort of backup electricity for the backup electricity system, since giving the intermittency of renewables, and also the small, relatively small, getting bigger, we hope in the future, interconnection capacity with France. So we depend very much on the intervention of the combined cycle gas turbine plants, which are many of Spain. Whenever there is a need to supply this high demand of electricity, and there is no sufficient renewables, or taking the fact that we function as an island because we cannot export that much electricity to France and to the continent yet. Of course, we are facing nowadays so many negative effects of this hiking in electricity prices, supply chains, disrupted inflation. We are seeing this peak of inflation. Some people think that may last for some time. Reduce disposable income for poor households. Affect, of course, at the end, economic activity and growth, and last but not least, social tension and social unrest. And this is what has caused mainly national government to intervene. One question would be how this electricity peak prices can last. Well, for the same reason, the reasons can't be explained, as I was saying before. These reasons may not last forever. Most probably, there will be other factors that may be intervening in the foreseeable future to make these prices go down. For example, increased production of LNG. We're seeing already in the United States some new investments in fracking. Norway and Russia eventually may normalize supplies. Gas stocks in Europe can be replenished. There may be better conditions. Rest production will be bigger. Rest intakes will be also more possible, etc., etc. You see here in this presentation what the prevision is. So it will be some months of this peak in the price of electricity, but all of a sudden, let's say by the beginning of half of next year, prices of electricity will go down. And one of the prices we expect to go down sharply will be Spain, precisely. Okay. Greece, Spain, and Italy have introduced national measures in order to cope with the situation. Additionally, in Spain, we have the problem of gas supply. You know that Algeria and Morocco has cut diplomatic relations in the last few weeks. And this may be a cause of Algeria interrupting gas supply through Morocco and having an additional effect on gas price in Spain and also on electricity. But here they are, Sanchez, Draghi, Mitsotakis, European leaders, only a couple of weeks ago in the meeting of Med9 in Athens, asked the European Commission to intervene. Von der Leyen was kept at surprise. They didn't have any reply by then. But now, with the time passing, new replies are coming in. The Commission is preparing a sort of a toolbox of European Union measures that mainly will basically take value-added tax reduction and also some excise duties, eventually using direct support to help member countries to cope with the situation. To finish, I would just simply say what we need now, national or EU solutions, always in the framework of the Fit for 55. Of course, this energy transition will be very long, and the present crisis, the hiccup, is a mere test. So we need it facing speedily and successfully as soon as possible. And the European Union should come and advise us, all of us, with an acceptable legislative framework so that member states can speedily implement new measures, or they can just adapt the measures they are already being taken. Climate targets are ambitious in Europe, but many of the pieces of the legislation included in for 55 are difficult to implement. Some of them require a lot of clarification. Also, some of them have fiscal nature, So it will require unanimity and will be difficult to negotiate. And some of them present extremely difficult technical difficulties, such as the carbon border adjustment mechanism. So we'll see what this will bring about. I expect that in the next European Council in October, a whole set of proposals by the Commission will be discussed by member states, and this crisis, we will have the necessary means to tackle this crisis without any further social tension. But of course, there are the questions to see what will happen in the medium term and what will happen in the long term. And I hope very much that the European Union will be able to keep its ambition and set the goals for the future of the world in a more green environment. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency. It was really an inspiring and insightful speech. And I would like, please take a seat.
I have
so that
some papers with the Spanish.
we will definitely distribute them.
Mm.
Yes, we will make sure that this happens. Thanks a lot. So I would like to proceed and actually introduce our next speaker from IRENA. Renewables are at the core of this green transition. And Mr. Arslan Khalid is here to replace his colleague, Dr. Rabia Fakusi, that couldn't make it, unfortunately, today. So we are very glad to have Arslan with us. The floor is yours over the next 6 minutes. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I hope everyone can see me and hear me. Before proceeding with the presentation, let me just say that I apologize on behalf of Dr. Rabia Faruqi, who couldn't be here because of some personal reasons. I hope that I can do justice to the ideas that we were trying to convey. Let me start by saying that as countries in the European Union and the world around us move towards a green energy transition, as they tackle the twin challenge of climate change and recovery from the pandemic, IRENA has been conducting an analysis of future pathways in order to see what is the direction or a trajectory that we need to take and what do we need to do in terms of policy interventions. And I will be presenting an overview of that work of IRENA. So moving on, let me first start by saying that as the ambassador has pointed out and as speakers before us have pointed out, the European Green Deal and the Fit for 55 package presents a very goal-oriented approach to achieve growth while simultaneously ensuring that we decouple growth from exploitation of natural resources and we simultaneously improve our environment. Now, IRENA's analysis shows that in order to achieve any such transformational change or transition, you need to look at the big picture. You need to not only look at the energy sector itself, but also the other layers, the systemic layers which surround the energy sector, such as the economy, the society, and the planet. And so in this sense, it is from our perspective, it is wonderful to see that the Green New Deal, the European Green Deal, has a very holistic approach towards growth, which looks at not only the energy sector, not only at technology, but at the broader picture, which includes development of human capital, development of natural resources, and all of that. And a holistic approach is definitely needed. And that's essentially the approach that we champion in our work also. Moving on to some of the recent work that we have been doing on energy transitions, our recent World Energy Transition Outlook, the VETO report, looks at a pathway to achieving 1.5 degrees by 2050. It looks, and the scenarios that we have created, that we have simulated, show that if we are to achieve that 1.5 degree pathway, renewables, energy conservation, electrification, and hydrogen are going to be the largest contributors in terms of savings of emission, in terms of reduction of emissions from now until 2050. When we look at the investment picture, we see that around 33 trillion US dollars of additional investments will be required. Cumulative, when you look at this, we will need up to 131 trillion US dollars by 2050 in order to achieve this. So therefore, there is all the more reason for countries around the world to come together and to join hands and to essentially work together to achieve this. However, while there are requirements for investments, our analysis shows there are significant socio-economic benefits that can come from this transition. When we look at the socio-economic benefits, we see that the GDP, the global GDP, can increase by around 1.2% on average from now until 2050. The welfare impacts, the welfare benefits are even more stronger. An 11% increase in welfare compared to the current energy scenario. When you look at jobs, I think that's one of the most important thing to highlight here, that all that investment which goes into renewables, energy efficiency, grids is going to result in a lot of jobs. We see that the energy sector itself can employ around 122 million jobs by 2050 globally. Jobs in renewables themselves could be around 43 million, which compares to 11.5 million that we have in renewables now. Our upcoming report, which focuses on Africa, provides more regional results also. We see that around 10 million jobs in 2050 will be in transition-related technologies. So there are benefits in terms of jobs, in terms of industrial value creation, improvement in GDP, welfare, which are related with this transition. Our earlier reports provided a more holistic view of the regions and how they progress under this transition. For the European Union, we foresee 2.7 million jobs in renewables by 2050. And essentially, the gains that we have in renewables and grid improvement, energy efficiency, more than offset the losses in the fossil fuel sector. There is a 7% increase in GDP, which is also can also result from this transition for the European Union. However, these impacts are, in order to ensure that these impacts are maximized and they are well distributed between the different sectors of the society, we need comprehensive policy action. And this policy action, as you can see in the slide, is not only focused on the energy sector, it's not only technology centric, but it has to transcend to other spheres, such as the development of the human capital, the preservation of the natural capital. Of course, deployment policies such as renewable energy auctions and net metering, feed-in tariffs, all of these are very important, but they have to be coupled with enabling policies, which encourage finance, integration policies, which allow us to have more renewables in the grid. We need a structural change which allows human capital to develop and for the benefits to extend to all sectors of the society. And with this, I would just like to end my presentation by reiterating something which the President of the European Commission recently said. She mentioned that the European Green New Deal is Europe's man on the moon movement. And this is quite apt since we have once in a generation opportunity to recover better and to build truly sustainable economies that foster biodiversity and recover better and to be truly sustainable. More broadly, we must make sure that our efforts are inclusive both in terms of the process, but also the outcome of the transformation of energy systems, economies, and society. Thank you very much for your time. I hope I didn't take too much of it.
Thank you so much, Arslan. It was really great to hear all these positive perspectives about green jobs. And in Greece, we have estimated that more than 150,000 green jobs are going to arise given the national policies. So our next speaker is going to provide his valuable insights in terms of green shipping. Again, in Greece, there is now a lot of initiatives going on about e-ferries, even hydrogen to be introduced in maritime. And I would like to welcome Andrew Scorer from SP Global Platts. Andrew, can you hear us? That's great.
Yes, I can. Kalimara, if that's pronounced right.
Okay. The
sorry,
floor is yours over the next 6 to 7 minutes. Thank you so much.
Okay. No, thanks very much. Sorry I couldn't be there. From S&P Global perspective, I'm on the analytics side. So I work with our future side, all the different commodities. And I mean, we're seeing that the energy transition, is having a more limited potential in the shorter term with the existing capital stock. But this is actually gives us more real implications when we start talking about the actual fleet, the shipping fleet overall and the turnover. And this is very dynamic and is in play with bunkers and the maritime transport, different trade flows. And, obviously, Greece is steeped in shipping history from there. So, I mean, our forward analytics, on an overall for the fuel splits are driven by views of the economy, the trade, and the relative fuel prices and the technology available. Now, the good thing with the shipping side is, there's a lot of technology available, but what we find is actually it's the fuel availability is going to be the issue. What type of fuel have we got? Is it going to be methanol, hydrogen, ammonia, LNG, and then you've got different colors of the rainbow. But we'll come on to that at the moment. But what it relies on heavily is to understand the fuel economics and the fleet dynamics. S&P Global Analytics estimates that the shipping sector accounts for a comparatively small, like 2 to 3% of the global CO2 emissions. But in the grand scheme of things, that is still big. At the same time, they have largely grown throughout the last decade and held up reasonably well in the pandemic impacted in 2020. But our global integrated energy model indicates about 1.7 year-on-year decline in shipping CO2 emissions in 2020 versus an 13 decline across the entire transport sector and a 6% decline across all sectors. But Platts Analytics is actually expecting emissions to rebound over the 5% in 2021. But if we look forward, is going to be the big challenge. I mean, we know that sort of the ships, the trading fleets, can vary between 25 and 30 years for a ship. Oil majors love it to be sort of 15 years, depending on sort of the vessel type. But when we get into the local side, you do have sort of like the dredgers, the ferries, and some of the smaller product tankers lasting longer than that, sort of up to 40 years. So if we take what the overall fleet of at the moment is over 100,000 ships in the trading fleet, you could actually then expect a third of those to be scrapped by January 1 of 2030, if you take that 25 to 30 years. So if we take two different cases, if you say the sort of the reference case, if we think as is at the moment with the vessel, the fuel availability, we think it could be around 23% of that fleet could be scrapped if everything went well. That equates to sort of about 23,000 ships, compared with the third if aspirationally all the fuel available came, and that would be about 35,000 ships being scrapped. But that's out to sort of the 2030s. A minimal reduction in the overall fleet is forecasted because of the potential fossil fuel decline actually starts really seeing in the 2050, because we've still got the scrubber technology, which is using high sulfur fuels, and all of the other ones coming forward. So if we're aiming to get to 2050, we've got energy efficiency on the eco ships is going to help meet the 2030 target, and majority of experts do think we're going to hit the 2030 target from what's been happening at the moment. The 2050 is the harder one, but we need those sort of vessel availabilities there. But if that's the case, we're talking with ships coming into the water, landing sort of 2025, 2030. So we've still got some time until we'll see that trend starting to happen. But I think with the owners are there, but the problem is it's the risk of the capital again. They've had to invest in ballast water systems. They've had to invest in scrubber technology. If they go that way, they've had to pay more money for a lower sulfur fuel. And now there's lots of different fuels there. It's going to be quite hard. So we attended the London International Shipping Week, and they were talking about that we actually need the sort of charterers, the banks, the financiers, charterers, owners, all to sort of actually have some sort of co-investing into this, to actually then lead that and reduce that risk for the banks. And I think that's the key for me, is actually reducing the risk. And you can see that by doing that, it will then embrace all the sort of the early adopters. You've got a lot of press all the time at the moment with Maersk and various other ship owners coming in saying, right, we're going to be investing in those technology. We now need to get that fuel invested, and we need to reduce that risk for the ESG investors to come in and give those bunker fuels sides. The EU ETS, I think, is a good thing. It's putting the mark down and actually starting to get that discussion going. Yes, you've got the UK as well doing something. You've got IMO in discussions, and they're coming out in sort of November and looking at it. This will all help get towards a global standard. We need to get to that, but we've got to have some of these early adopters, like the EU, bringing out some sort of infrastructure, governance, and then hopefully then it will actually then produce some carbon tax on carbon pricing and pricing of the pollution. And this is all the sort of the web of the problem with shipping. But I think we're in a good shape from that perspective. But if we then look at the actual overall cost of ships, so if I take a very large crude carrier for the dirty tankers and moving oil around the world, a new build at the moment is around 93 million for a delivery of that 22-23 delivery. If we then put sort of an ammonia ready ship, which is going to be sort of 2024, you could actually say that additional cost, say for 2 ships, is 4.2 million. So that sort of equates to about 2.3% of an additional cost onto that. Who's going to pay for that? A ship owner is not going to pay for that if then some other charterer wants to go and actually use methanol. So we need to have that network there. And I think there's a lot of ships coming into this technology. And if we think about the trials, and you've mentioned about the hydrogen side, our reference case will change as the trade flows adapt to the new supply and demand balances across the varied commodities. But we may only be talking about 10,000 vessels or so, but the growth outlook in our balances is relatively flat. And that's something to keep in mind. Now, Platts Analytics expects local navigation, and this is the key one, is basically the driver of these types of ships to grow by an average of an annual rate of just 0.8. So here, the first opportunity to decarbonize potential for high turnover due to that aging fleet and a relatively slow growth outlook. And indeed, we've seen some movement on this. There's a couple of examples. The Bay Area in the USA has seen multiple hydrogen fuel cell ferries complete operational trials. I'm thinking of the Golden Gate Marine ferry that uses, I think it's 360 kilowatt fuel cell, and has, to my understanding, begun operations. And in the UK, you've got an H2 diesel dual fuel system, which trialed in Orkney last year. And at Busan International Boat Show, a hydrogen powered ferry was demoed there. I think elsewhere, though, it seems to be early days. I know there's a 2,000 passenger international ferry being, between Norway and Denmark, is being planned to enter service in 2027. And so that's the problem which we've got, is it's going that way, if that all makes sense.
This exciting analytics, we also feel that the Athens Declaration that was signed here in September is going to boost green shipping. So we will certainly need your insights in the future also. At this point, I would like to introduce our next speaker. He is Michael Schmela from SolarPower Europe, and we're looking forward to his comments. Michael, I'm not sure if you have been connected. Can you hear us? Yes,
Nektaria.
that's great. So good morning from Athens. The floor is yours.
Thanks. I have some slides with me. Good morning from Brussels. Sorry, I cannot be with you. Yeah, let me just share with you a few our view as a Solar Sectors Association of Europe and the Fit for 55 package. So from the renewable sector, and I believe I can speak here not only for solar, we are really glad to see that the Commission opted in its Fit for 55 package for 40% renewables by 2030, which is considerably higher than the 32% current target, and it's actually at the upper end of the 38 to 40% range that was discussed before. While we do consider this FF55 a landmark achievement for solar, we believe more ambition is possible and actually also needed to meet the Paris targets. I just want to go briefly with you through a few slides actually to show you what we really liked and where we see maybe also some challenges. So coming to the 40% target on this slide, I think it's an important slide to simply see what could be projected and what that means for solar. This the EC proposes 40% that corresponds to their impact assessment of around 383 gigawatt of solar for the EU 27 by 2030. We've installed around 140 gigawatts so far. But if you look at the business as usual scenario, we at SolarPower Europe anticipate that almost 600 gigawatts will be installed anyway by 2030. So that means the target, which is the underlying assumption for solar for the 40% share, falls actually short of what will happen anyway. We believe, because solar is so cost efficient, that you would actually install better 870 gigawatt of solar. So quite some ambition more than what we see in the FF55. Another point is when you talk to solar and other renewable developers, their key issue is one issue, and that's permitting. Administrative burdens remain really one of the key barriers to renewable energy development across the EU. Good thing is that the European Commission has acknowledged the concern and has taken action. It really has strengthened the provision on administrative procedures and improve their implementation. There's actually an extra article for that. So what will happen is permitting guidelines are expected for the end of this year. By end of 2022, the Commission will publish a guidance to member states how to implement then the RED II provisions. And 1 year later, in 2023, there will be a proposal to introduce a review clause which empowers the Commission to revise the permitting articles. So I think this is all very good news, because really this is a major pain for everyone who wants to invest in renewables. Talking about hydrogen, we all know that when you look into the daily energy news today, you could believe the hydrogen economy is around the corner. Being in solar for over 25 years, I can tell you it's not. It will be still a bumpy road, but it's great what the Commission has done, especially for the renewable sector. So they clearly said that low carbon H2 is excluded from the scope and target calculations. It's really about renewable hydrogen. There are sectorial targets both for transport and industry for renewable hydrogen, and there's improved taxation rules, And they also address additionality, which also then takes into account that we need probably more renewables. And this all offers a strong business development potential. So really great what's there. The challenge here is actually to defend the Commission's proposal when it comes to member states. We don't expect headwinds from the Parliament. It's also great is great proposal from the Commission regarding corporate PPAs. They've really clearly understood what the potential of the corporate sector is. There was a new article also added to this. There will be requirements for the member states on how to develop these framework to support corporate PPAs. I think one thing which was important for us that we could also see in Germany, for example, and in France, it was always difficult with corporate PPAs simply because there's so much subsidies into existing solar power plants. And that's why GOs were not accepted for that. But with the new proposal, actually, guarantees of origins are also possible for projects that do receive state support. Maybe just 2 more slides. One thing beyond that, the IRENA representative has already mentioned that it's about renewable jobs, and I think this is really important for solar as being the most job-intensive renewable energy source. You can really see that here. So the more solar or renewables are installed and solar is installed, obviously, the more jobs it means. We have 300,000 direct, indirect jobs in solar today, and that will double by 2024. And as solar continues to grow, we will add more jobs. What's also important for us as an association that the Commission has recognized that solar is not only about installations, but that we also need an industrial sector, which we lost to China quite a while ago. But with solar becoming the dominant source worldwide and in Europe in the long run, it is important that we not import everything and again rely on imported products for our energy, but regarding energy security, that we also re-establish our own industrial sector. And finally, I think this is important, solar is underestimated by most governments. You can see that when you look at the national energy climate targets of the different governments to comply with 2030 targets. They are very unambitious. But if you look at this slide, the yellow one means solar. That's the only one still showing considerable, actually, cost decrease potential, while already being the cheapest in many parts of the world. So I think my main message is, please don't underestimate solar. Look at it when you think about measures for reaching 2030 targets and carbon neutrality by 2050. Thanks.
And at this point, I think that we have a few minutes, maybe for a final remark and a few questions. So starting from His Excellency, Mr. Ambassador, we have seen that Spain invests a lot on green hydrogen. You're going to direct almost 1.5 billion from the RRF over the next 3 years. And also PPAs really have a significant momentum. I think more than 50 contracts were signed from last year. So what is the success story? What are the key messages to take on elsewhere in Europe? Thank you.
Well, indeed, green hydrogen will be very important in Spain, and the Spain's government commitment is to become an industrial hub of green hydrogen, and for that it is expected that there will be at least 4 gigawatts installed by 2030, and 9 billion euros should be invested for 2030 in this case. For 2050, it is expected that 1/3 of the fuel used for land transport will be green hydrogen. So there are many projects ongoing, very important right now in the province of Guadalajara between an American company and Iberdrola. Will put a production of renewable hydrogen in 2023 with a capacity of 500 megawatt a year this year. So I mean, we are talking about new things. As for PPAs, yes, this is a very good news for us, because as far as I know, almost a third or more of the PPAs signed in Europe in the last 2 years have been in Spain, precisely. And this is not a coincidence. It's the fact that most of these PPAs involve solar farms establishment. Usually big utilities are the providers of these PPAs, and big companies are also receiving of this renewable energy. And still the contracts are for 10 years. So there is a lot of things to do, and our expectation, and that's the reason why I said it before, is that the price of energy, of electricity, will substantially be reduced in the foreseeable future. And one of the reasons precisely is the expansion of these PPA agreements in Spain.
It is great that you have all this climate ambition. We share this vision, and we are also trying to follow. Now I would like to ask Andrew, since green shipping is certainly of great importance for Greece. Andrew, I'm not sure if you're still connected. My question is, how do you envisage, what is your forecast about the shipping fleet by 2030? And what is the kind of split that you see between conventional and alternative fuels?
No, I'm still connected. Don't worry. The conventional side, so the current order book at the moment, you've got sort of 68% of the alternative fuels is LNG, and then the rest is the proportion. I think it's 0.2% is hydrogen at the moment. If we just stick with hydrogen, our reference case of where we think out to 2030, we think actually sort of you'll still have about 73% of the order books will be LNG. Hydrogen will be 0.6. Aspirationally, if all the hydrogen does come on stream by and we can get there, we could see that increase up to sort of 3.8 or so 2.4%. But comparing it to conventional at the moment, where the current fleet is 94% conventional only fleet, we've got 4.5% of scrubbers, which is dealing with the SOx, and then you've got 1.1, which is actually all the alternative fuels. A reference case.
So a lot of innovative solutions, but at the same time, I suppose that harmonization of standards across the EU and the rest of the world is also crucial. Arslan, if you could please help us regarding this question, how can we possibly minimize the cost that is actually borne by our consumers? Do you see a role for PPAs, for energy communities? How can we engage more our citizens in this transition process?
Thank you very much for the question. I think it's one of the most complex questions that we face. I think I like to briefly touch upon one particular aspect of this question, which is that we need to look at it in the long-term perspective, and we need to, if we are serious about the transition itself, if we want to achieve the climate goals that we have, then we need to realize that the whole-scale marginal pricing system does not work for the transition. Precisely because of the fact that, as many of the participants and speakers know very well, gas is the clearance fuel in many countries. Gas prices go up, so do others, right? So if we need to move towards a sustainable energy system, we have to realize that we need long-term solutions which reward the things that we desire, such as renewable generation and flexibility, rather than just looking at the marginal pricing systems, right? And another thing that we need to do in the long run is to increase the rates of deployment for renewables significantly. I think Michael had a very interesting point with this, right? We need to up the ambition significantly in order to achieve our targets. Once once renewable energy generation goes up, this will help us wean ourselves off of transition fuels, which in many ways are at the root cause of the escalation in price. So I hope that we can work together in order to achieve, fundamentally transform our energy systems, the way energy generation is remunerated, and hopefully move towards a more sustainable energy future. Thank you.
That was actually a very integrated remark, and I'm sure that we need to accelerate the transition because this is the ultimate, the fundamental solution. And if we encounter irregularities, as it currently happens in the market, I'm sure that if we work all together, we can find mechanisms and ways to address them so as not to distort the decarbonization, which is really crucial. Now, since solar is so important for Greece and the Mediterranean, I would like to ask Michael, what role do you see for corporate and industrial solar in the future?
Okay, I think that's a good point because if there's maybe one thing to criticize at the FF55, it's probably the missing provision for C&I, for the corporate and commercial and industrial sector. So I think what's also in the clean energy package was addressed was actually the prosumer, so solar systems up to 30 kilowatt, and with PPAs, GOs, the large-scale segment was also nicely addressed. But if we look at what the number I showed from this 870 gigawatt, which we should actually reach, according to our modeling, half of the potential is actually C&I. And here we also need similar provisions because, of course, they have to compete with lower electricity prices than the residential consumers. And so we also have to simply make sure that they are really supported and that this is also addressed, because otherwise this segment, which is a key pillar, will not fly as much as we need it.
Great remarks. Actually, what is critical in all this massive green transition is to get all stakeholders focused on the same targets and convince them that this transition is essential, that there is a lot of value and huge opportunities for quality of life, for investments in the right direction, because climate resilience is actually our only option for existence. So I would like to thank all of you, and I hope to be able to continue this discussion in the near future in a physical panel, not a virtual one. And I'm sure that the more we work on this climate ambition and strategies to mitigate climate effects, the more we will be able to have this physical presence. Otherwise, we will continue being digital. So I'm sure this is also an incentive for us to work harder on our national policies, on European legislation, on engaging our citizens to our common goals. I would like to thank you very much, all of you, and particularly Your Excellency for sharing your time here and your so interesting remarks. I wish you all the best, and I'm sure that we're going to proceed with the next panel in a while. Thank you very much.